Okay, I think we're now ready to start. So, welcome everyone to another session of Effisus Connected Value. Today with me, I have João. João, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Enrique.
Today we'll be talking about facade interfaces, more specifically about prefabrication. So, last Monday, we were talking about interfaces in a more general way. We discussed the main topics that, or the main characteristics that should be attended. Standard membranes, how to adhere, etc. And now we'll be talking more about the technology that is available in order to get those interfaces or to those interfaces prefabricated pieces, and of course improving the installation on site. But we'll go into details just later on this presentation. By now, I'll just like to ask you to be familiar or to try to find on the side of your screen the Q&A icon that you just are free to access and more than welcome to access in order to place any question that you find important to place that would add value to this session. Again, it is a pleasure having you with us today. And regarding prefabrication, we can be so just last Monday I just brought again these pictures, these photos to this presentation because I really find important that we again understand what are the interfaces. So when we talk about interfaces, we talk about the one specific element, one specific material finishes and another starts, of course. So it's a connection between different materials that have different properties, different behaviors, so different ways of accommodating movement that behave different when exposed to high temperatures, for instance, low temperatures. So to even with the aging of the material, it will retract in a different way. So when we look at interfaces, we should understand that these are very specific details. This is not the same as managing an overlap between the same material, for instance. So many things to be considered, and just on Monday we looked also into this kind of main, I would say, main necessities or main parameters to be taken into account. And here I will just go very quickly across them. So water vapor and air permeability. So this is of course the main purpose of sealing an interface. But as I was saying, with different materials, you need to be sure about compatibility, because a poor cohesion, for instance, a poor adhesion to a specific substrate will implicate the failure of the system. Then UV exposure, and this will depend on the project. So it could be only during the construction phase, but also some specific layers that remain exposed to the UV during the lifetime of the building. Then some similarity between elements, and this is something that I'm asking your attention to, because we'll be presenting some solutions that would really benefit projects that feature this kind of similarity. So many windows the same, for instance. Then we have the access during installation, and this is something also really related to prefabrication. So when we are talking about interfaces, we usually are talking about putting a roll of membrane, of standard membrane, and the cartridge of glue in the hands of someone that will be hanging on the facade, trying to do this kind of magic around the window, cutting and gluing and splicing and putting more glue on top of it. And so in the end, something should be or something should show up that is pretty efficient, but it's not always that easy. So we need really to understand what's the access during installation. Then fire, of course, because it's a really hot topic nowadays. Dimension, because we really need, or we shouldn't need to install something that doesn't really fit the proposed or the specific the width available, for instance, on the project. And also other things that are not mentioned here, for instance, movement. Of course, when we are dealing with interfaces, we need to take into consideration movement. So when an interface, for instance, the most current interface between a window and the sheeting board, of course, we are expecting movement, even if they are quite small, but at least some centimeters we should be able to accommodate with our solution. Right now, also giving an overview of our perspective from the standard market, and that is this mass production, so industry producing very standard products, and the customers being only able to go to the manufacturers and pick up something that they find interesting for their project. So this is just a one-way direction, so one-way interaction. But we really think that this should be in a very different way through this interactive dialogue. So which means that not only the manufacturer, but the customer, so every and other players should get involved in order to have this exchange of information. So of course, manufacturers have technology available, so have the tools available to change products, to adapt solutions, and of course, customers and other players have the information from the project, from the requirements, and this information from both sides, these tools should be put in service of each part. So I think this interactive dialogue would highly benefit the project and the efficiency of the project. So if you remember, just last Monday we were talking about customization on PDMs, for instance, and we have here a very simple scheme to understand. So that is our different levels of customization that we can add to this kind of product. And we were just talking more specifically into this about these four first levels. There are standard rolls, unlimited width, so cutting with any width, then having self-adhesive bands on each edge, and then, for instance, adding clipping gasket, that is a vulcanized gasket that just goes with the membrane itself, so you don't need to apply any glue. You just need to clip in on the window groove. So really simple, really efficient way of dealing with these interfaces. But today we would like to focus more on this kind of prefabricated pieces, so pieces that will solve problems that you have on site and that you normally have to deal with standard membrane, a scissor on the hands of the man that needs to cut and glue and cut again. So we're trying to avoid this kind of procedure. We have here so prefabricated corners, of course, to still very specific corners on windows, but also in other details. Prefabricated frames, so this is even more than a corner, and you will be able to look at this more specifically later. And even more customized are these prefab 3D pieces. So this is really something developed for each project. So it's a bespoke piece. It's something that will highly improve the efficiency and the ease of installation on site. And of course, this will avoid many errors that we usually see on every site. So of course, when we are climbing on this pyramid, we are adding value to the solution, to the project, and improving the efficiency of the facade. We today will be more focusing, as I was saying, on the top levels of this pyramid. Here we have some photos regarding corners. Okay, just if you remember, just the last slide. First, the first solution that we'll be discussing today is corners. I will ask João, if you don't mind, just sharing some information or some of the main advantages of having a corner in this kind of project, please.
Absolutely. So as we saw on the previous slide, we're able to do pretty much everything when it comes to EPDM technology to seal this type of interfaces. In this case, we find very interesting to bring as the first or this other type of level prefabrication when it comes to corners. So we all know corners are probably one of the weakest points to seal, or one of the hardest points to seal between this type of interfaces. Some particular cases, as you see on the top right picture, it's quite common, say quite simple, but of course it brings a different level of installation in waterproof when you have this is already a pre-made prefab. Again, this is just a simple example, but we can do everything with this. So we can get even more complicated depending on the window shape, the type of interfaces, as you see there on the bottom. So different configurations to seal this typology of interfaces. What is important to see here is sometimes we don't have the proper space, the proper conditions to do this type of jobs at site. And we all know the teams are constantly changing, and so you don't actually have a proper meta statement to actually how to seal these corners. So here it's interesting to have already a pre-made, a prefab piece with the exact configuration that you need. In this case, sometimes at site, all you need to do is just apply a bit of adhesive to the board or to the slab, depending where it's going to be sealed. In other cases, we even have projects that this could be installed at factory. So quite interesting to have this in here.
Okay, thank you very much, João. And I think also just to add to your explanation, I think an easy way of understanding the importance of this, of having these kind of corners available in our project are, for instance, looking at this, I would say the most standard detail that we have, and understanding how it is to deal with the most standard case with standard membrane. So of course, you cannot work in this case with the same strip of membrane. So you need to use two different strips, one on the top and other on the side of the window, for instance. Then you need always to cut the membrane, the edge of the membrane here when it's reaching, for instance, this side membrane, when it's reaching the top, you need to cut in here. So you'll have here a direct hole to the inside. And then the same occurs with the membrane that comes from the top of the window, and that has to be cut just right here, and the same specific hole will be created in the same specific point. So there's no chance of doing this in a different way, or at least this is the most common way of doing this kind of details. And how to solve this membrane? Of course, as you're facing three plan corners, so you're not able to apply any patch of membrane. So it's really difficult to apply a patch of membrane here on top of this weak point. And then the only solution is applying glue on top, so more glue. And we understand that when we are solving things with the installation or the application of more glue, of more adhesive, what we'll be doing is removing the warranty or the insurance, the security that you have on that installation. So when we are relying this kind of interfaces on EPDM, that of course is a really durable material. So already with many proofs on the construction industry of its efficiency and durability. Here we are just opening a hole in our EPDM and covering it with glue. So this is the most simple one. Okay, that's why I like to mention here this case, because if we look into the most simple and understand, even there we have always a potential leakage point to understand the need of this kind of solution. So just moving forward, we'll be able to find also this reference to the prefab frames. So as we were saying, the importance of having this kind of prefab solutions is to avoid these potential leakage points. And I think that's not an easier way to understand the benefit of having a prefab solution than with a prefab frame, because when we have a prefab frame, and this should of course be analyzed project by project. Okay, not every project benefits from having a prefab frame, of course, but when, for instance, you have many windows with the same dimension, or some repetition, some similarity between windows that would allow you to use the same type or the same dimensions of the prefab frame, this is something that should be taken into account in your project. And what's then a prefab frame? So it's no more than having the full perimeter. So all this work that you normally need to do with plain membrane, and so in each window, for instance, you'll find 4 corners to deal with. You'll just have the chance to get a prefab frame, so a complete frame that will just fit into your window, and you just need to seal all around the connection, the direct connection to the window. So just for instance, applying a bit of adhesive below the membrane, and then the membrane will press on the window. But we can not only provide a full frame, so closed frame, we also can provide U-sleeve frames. So it's the same, but of course with a U-shape. And the benefit of having this kind of frames, from our experience, for instance, is more related to having sometimes, imagine this way, in this picture, for instance, you have all the windows have the same height, but many of them have different widths. So if you imagine, you cannot use the same prefab frame here that you can use in here. But if you're talking about U frames, you can use a new frame here on the vertical and another here on this side, the same as you can use in here. Okay, so we need really to understand the similarity. So we need to look into our project. It's important to receive this kind of elevations, this kind of windows scheme, to understand what's the main product, what's the main solution to propose. Okay, and we are available to give you options, to give you prices, so in order to understand what's important or what's interesting to consider in each project. Okay, each project is a different one, and we like to look at it that way. So this is a solution that normally benefits also for off-site installation. So of course, this allows the window to come already with this band all around it. And I think that's it, João. If you'd like to add something, please feel free. So
yes,
otherwise,
it's just important to mention that we don't have, of course, all of this is prefab. We don't have this is already in stock, so this is made exclusive for that typology, for this exclusive that project. But it's important to mention that we do not have any quantities or order limitation when it comes to this. Of course, the goal here is to optimize as much as possible these quantities, So here, just to understand a little bit how this process works. We try to start it out. This is in an early stage, in a conceptual phase, to see what are the differences, the similarities between these interfaces, the typologies of the quantities you have of a windows, in this case, in a facade. So we can provide a specific solution. And in some cases, a U-sleeve, as you saw, or half a frame will be a better solution. When you have, for instance, a top right or top left, they are the same. But the middle actually varies. So in this case, you can have a half a sleeve with just a matter of overlapping a strip on the middle or on the top. You can do this. So just to understand the possibilities, in some cases, yeah, it could be a full frame if we find they're all similar or very common typologies. So this is just to understand a little bit this process, how we analyze to try to optimize in terms of quantities in typology, of course.
Okay, thank you very much, João. And also we can, for instance, have clip-in gaskets to the edge of this frame. So we can fully customize even this frame with top adhesive strips with the clip-in gaskets. So pretty much as per the project requirement. And here we have another level of customization. So these 3D pieces, prefab roof fill, are very specific pieces that we can provide to each project. This means really receiving project details, having the chance to discuss this with our client to analyze the main challenges that we're facing on that facade ceiling, and turning this into very specific solutions, okay, into solutions that will make the installation easier, make the installation more efficient, and of course a better image in the end, so more clean installation. And of course this is really has value to some specific projects, and we'll have the chance to share some of the projects that we are dealing with this kind of solutions for you to understand. And so in terms of technology, this is no more than taking advantage of the properties of the EPDM. So again, we know them for long, so that's why the industry is so reluctant in giving away this performance of the EPDM. So we know everything is being turning around. So membranes, breather membranes, VCLs, the cladding, everything, even the glass, everything is being turned around because of fire, for instance. And when it concerns to EPDM, and for instance, also another topic is cavity trays, for instance. There are some specific topics that people are not willing to give away these kind of things that they have. So, for instance, the performance of the EPDM is something that until now it's not able to be matched by other solutions. So here we are taking advantage of the EPDM, and we are just making tailor-made pieces. So this is just being able and having the technology to do so without any leakage points, hot vulcanization, without any glue. So this is EPDM with EPDM, vulcanized at factory, and being able to provide solutions that will just fit into a very specific detail. For instance, here we have a very specific situations that we have faced, and we have support and assist our clients in that. That were in this specific case, they already had this kind of, so the client already had this kind of profile, and it's a very, as you can just see here, it's a very complex profile, so an EPDM profile that just got into our hands, and they asked us to make it fit the corner itself. So the corner was not able to, they were not able to make an efficient solution just by joining or trying to glue both parts or linear parts of this gasket on a corner. So they asked us to use our technology, our tools that we have available within the PDM scope to make this kind of very specific interfaces. I don't know if there is something that you'd like also to share here, João, because you
yeah, I think you can just to understand a little bit how this actual technology works. So we have pretty much two types of technology that we apply when it comes to true seal or 3D pieces. One is using die molding with EPDM extrusion, and this is exactly what we did to actually join those corners. And there's another one which is the hard vulcanization, as we're going to see, as you saw in other pieces, which assure us a very strong bond between all the joints. So what we're doing is pretty much join two materials and assuring that this bonding is very strong in comparison to just applying just a bit of adhesive or standard procedure to join.
Okay, and if we move into this kind of situation, so this is I would say the same kind of technology, right, João? So we are still playing with vulcanized EPDM and some other technology that we can use to provide customized pieces of EPDM. And here, I suppose this is familiar to everyone. So this is something that is being applied very, very usually in the UK, for instance. And so prefab balconies, so they just arrived to the site already made, and you just need to fit it on these arms, on these beams, and still have to deal with this steel connectors. So here, just next to the facade, you have this perforation. In this case, you have, for instance, different configurations or different sections of this element, different inclinations, angles with this surface in here, a narrow space here to deal with. So this happens a lot. Sometimes our I-beam shape, so really difficult to seal with plain membrane again, and we can be talking about really small sections of these beams. So imagine having a roll on your end and you're hanging on the facade, just trying to reach as much as possible all this surface in here in order to provide a proper adhesion to these surfaces. And imagine doing this with a standard roll in your hands, scissor, so cutting pieces and trying to get these corners done properly. So this is simply impossible to do in a correct way. So sometimes we are dealing with this kind of width, 120 mil, so really small. And then we are able to provide this kind of pieces, for instance, that you can just fit into these details. So really easy, no possibility of error in here. So we just need to glue all around this perimeter on both edges of the sleeve, and then we can also provide this with an open joint, because of course when you have things like this, you are not able to put the sleeve from the top of this arm, as you're facing here a larger section. So you need to apply this all around this smaller section, and this having this open joint will allow you to put it all around and then close easily on site. Again, different. No, so this is not something that we are using as standard. So you don't have limitation in terms of width. We can give you can provide solutions for any shape that you need, and then we have different technology available in order to get these solutions done. So just moving forward also, because I would like to also to discuss to share some information about this project, and I will ask João, because you were more close to this project. If you'd like to share something with the audience, please.
Yes, Enrique. So as we see here, this is pretty much a full lab or another level of customization. So was a Norman Foster project in Madrid. This is funny in this situation because we're in a CPD in Spain, and the client we're talking about this two connector, the previous slide, this typology or this things that we can do with or prefabrication technology, and the client in the end of the session approach us and say, oh, I think I have a very interesting project that we can take advantage of this technology. So we went we request a couple of drawings to try to understand actually how the facade scheme works. So you see there's sort of this intersection or this crossing sections in the facade. And I would think you find almost impossible to deal with this as a standard way, which is just a matter of overlapping, cutting, gluing. Will be in the end just a ball of adhesive in every of this intersection crossing sessions. So we did study all the details, 3D drawings. We analyzed the whole project. And in the end, you see you see a lot of intersections, but in the end we were able to even fulfill the whole project with 4 typologies, which was 2 types of X shapes. You see one of them in the pictures, and even other V or a Y shape. So you see, this is very tricky. Again, pretty hard to do this at site. You see many different points, weak points. As Enrique is pointing out, probably 8 weak points in this crossing sessions. And in the end, all you need to do is just to apply a strip on the rest of the legs or the rest of the profile. So quite simple. And I think here, Enrique, the goal is to show the possibilities. For those who are watching, we always try to comment this and bring this images, this type of projects, is to be aware that this is available. Again, I don't think all projects will request this thing, but when you're facing something like this, and you have a project like this, just to be aware that this is available. So in the design, the tender stage, so as a specifier, just to mention something as a prefab piece to see this type of interfaces. So I think it's interesting to mention this. We see a very familiar faces here on the session today. So some of the architects are watching or already know about the solutions. So I think it's the same.
Yeah, indeed, João. And so as you're saying, this is available. I think most of for instance, the facade contractors, when they see this kind of solution, they ask about price, or if this is possible or not to be considered in our project. And of course, we are talking about something that is more expensive than a standard membrane. This is obvious, even because it has different work behind the scenes. And but we have to understand that in the whole picture. So when we are dealing with this kind of details with plain membrane, we have to understand the time of installation. So the money that we'll waste on 2 men, for instance, around this kind of 2 men around this kind of corner, this kind of detail, the waste of glue, the waste of membrane. These are very specific points that you cannot even predict before installation how long it will take to deal with this kind of interfaces with a very standard membrane. So again, we are able to quote your project, to understand the project needs. This is something also, I think, also related with this next slide. So for instance, we have this kind of interaction with our clients. So if they're able to give us some details prior to the even the manufacturing, we are able to look into these details and to provide our solutions and to suggest and recommend our solutions. For instance, in this case, we have a direct relation with the final pieces just prefabricated for very specific projects. So here you have all these interfaces that we will need to deal with standard using the standard membrane, but then you're able to just apply this one single piece of EPDM in all those details. So really simple to be installed. And imagine doing this with standard membrane. Imagine how many potential leakage points you'll have on the facade, okay? And you can just ignore them or treat them. And here, also very much related with what we were saying. So being able to understand each project and to suggest the best solutions we can suggest to your project. So something that we are able and that is related to all our solutions. So this is an Effisus approach, an Effisus methodology. We do not keep this kind of steps. So we would like to take these steps along with you in order to understand what's the best solution for each project, to have those details and to be able to suggest this kind of I would say this is not only a product, this is a system as we like to promote and to provide to the site, because we do not only do interfaces, as you know, we do breathable, we do VCL, we do perforation sealing, so everything that is related with the weatherproofing, we are on that. And so you're able to get something like, for instance, this kind of project where you can see the full system, so all details being referred in these drawings. And even for this I would say projecting elements, so like these beams and steel connectors as we were seeing before, we can look into this and present you solutions, present you costs, of course, but you'll be also able to get from us compatibility tests. So we have a very specific roofing membrane, and you need to be certain about the compatibility. So you are recommending a solution, and what about the connection to the roofing membrane when it just reaches the top of the facade? So we're able to do that as well as site visits and practical training. These kind of documents, we also produce them. So for instance, here is a compatibility test with some of the, for instance, the classification of the failure within the adhesion. Then site training, manuals of installation, so looking into very specific details, inspection at site. So we do this for our direct clients, so going to the site and understanding how it can be improved if you're installing the solution in the best way possible. So we do these kind of things as we think otherwise you'll not be adding the full value that you can to the project. And just as we're about to finish, I would like just to highlight again the main advantage of detailing when regarding to interfaces. And of course, if you detail, you'll be looking, or if you take this into consideration when detailing this kind of availability on the interfaces, you'll be of course providing or suiting the project requirements in the whole picture, in the entire picture, but also ensuring compatibilities, allowing proper training, less errors at site, of course, because when we are training people at sites and providing solutions, for instance, prefab solutions, prefabricated solutions, you'll of course be avoiding possibility of errors at site, but also material waste, as we were saying. These prefab pieces avoid the overwaste of overusage of adhesives, of glue, of even of silicone. So you'll be just spending the product or the quantities that you really need to the very specific detail, and then of course improving the facade efficiency. So this was what we had for today in terms of prefabrication. I would like to thank you everyone for being with us today. Some important thing I would like to mention, and that I would really appreciate your help, is just taking just 1 minute of your time to answer a feedback that will just pop up in the end of this presentation. So just when you finish the session, you'll be asked, invited to answer, I think, 3 or 4 questions regarding this feedback to this presentation. So this is very interesting to ourselves in order to define the next topics, in order to understand how we should approach differently each session. So please, if you can do so, I would really appreciate that. And then you have here my contacts, my number, my email. You're more than welcome to reach out for any question. I would like also to thank João for being with us here today.
Thank you, Henrique.
Yeah.
If you allow me just to take the opportunity, we for those who doesn't know, we're doing dedicated CPD sessions training for your company, for your colleagues. So if you find interesting, you can also contact Henrique as well. We'll be more than glad to arrange an exclusive session dedicated for your team.
Yeah. And during these times, we really find it interesting. Because some people look at these times into or like we are losing opportunities, but in fact there are additional opportunities and some things that we should take advantage of, and one of them are these lack of distances. So we can now, for instance, get everyone in one live CPD session. So all people in the same company can be at their own homes, for instance, and being with us during a CPD, online CPD. So yes, João, thank you very much for pointing this out. As if you have so some technical department on your company and you'd like us to provide you a CPD session, please just email me, as I'll be more than happy to include you in our agenda and schedule with you the best day to do so. So again, thank you very much. Thank you very much, João.
Thank you. Thank you.
And see you on the next Connected Hour session. That will be tomorrow with myself again, and on Friday with Miguel. So please, at the same time, 10 a.m. We'll be here with you again. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.